Cinematography is the art of harnessing the transformative power of light. When used wisely, light can create wonders, enhancing the visual storytelling and elevating a film's appeal to extraordinary heights. Cinematographers, the unseen maestros, meticulously craft these captivating visuals that audiences experience and admire on screen. In the upcoming masterclass, we'll gain invaluable insights into this art form from a true virtuoso, exploring techniques that every storyteller must have in their creative arsenal. Welcome on stage the world-renowned cinematographer from Australia, the man who has overseen the visuals from the films we have loved and admired over the years, such as Hold Your Breath, Rain Man, The English Patient, Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, Mad Max Fury Road. So please join me with a big round of applause, the Oscar-winning legend, Mr. John Seal. May I now request Dr. Ajay S. Singh, Chief Controller of Ministry of Information and Broadcasting and Ministry of Petroleum and Natural Gas, to please join us on stage to felicitate our celebrated speaker. Thank you, sir, for joining us with the felicitation. And now, over to Mr. John Seal with a gracious request to commence his masterclass and enlighten us with his brilliance.
Oh, thank you very much for that lovely welcome. I don't feel I deserve that sort of a welcome. I was only just doing my job. And it ended up in a row of quite satisfying films, and I hope you enjoyed them. As part of the masterclass, in a way it's very difficult to explain sometimes how films are made, because there's no formula per se to the making of films. Every film is different. Every film has a new script. Every film has a new location, a geography, a time zone. And every film has to be approached as I feel, as an individual film. It's very easy, I think, as a cinematographer, to go from one film to another with a style. Maybe you created a style on one film and you like it because it is satisfying, it looks good, it photographically is acceptable, and you feel like you might take it on to the next film. But I've always, over the years, tried not to do that, to try and accept the new script as the first film I've ever worked on, and there's no influence from the past to come in photographically to create that script into a film. So, in a way, what is lovely about being asked to work on all of these films is that they were all different, even though some of them are set in the same contemporary era. Do you mind if I sit down? Oh, right. Thank you. Contemporary eras, you still had a different locations or climatic zones or whatever to change it, even though it is still in a contemporary situation. And I found that maybe I should digress a little quickly to how I started, because back in the early 1960s, the Australian film industry was zilch. There was no feature film industry to speak of at all. There was a very occasional American film might have come into the Australia or the Pacific. One or two smatterings of English films came out, but really there was no workforce behind it all. Mainly, back then it was television broke loose in Australia, and I'd been working on a big sheep station in Central Australia and decided I wanted to get into film. And I went to Sydney, and after a year I finally got into the Australian Broadcasting Commission, which is the government-run television station. And I started a 7-year apprenticeship because there were no film schools, there were no universities with film learning facilities at all. It was just what we used to call the school of hard knocks, where you got a job and you learnt as you were, as an apprentice, basically, to it. So I had 7 years at the ABC, and it was the best 7 years, I've got to say, anybody could ever get, because it was a core establishment of 26 cameramen, and they were fed out over all the aspects of TV coverage, from documentaries, hard news for the night's television, documentaries on rural agricultural problems, climatic, the arts, music. There were documentaries being made for the ABC every week, and we were rotated around from one department to another. So I was able to learn really how to cover a horse race. I got long lectures about how to level the camera for a horse race. It sounds silly, but it was invaluable little hints of how to make a camera record a situation in the best possible way. So all of that 7 years was absolutely the best I could get, because about 5 years in, the ABC decided to go into what we call drama, and that was filming 50-minute little TV shows with actors. Well, I mean, I loved doing the documentaries out back in Australia, because that's where I did a lot of work, and I loved going out there. But suddenly we went out back with actors and with a big 35mm camera, and we recorded actors in the outback. And I just fell in love with that more so than ever. So after the 7 years I left, and Australia then started to gear up a little bit more. A lot of overseas people were coming into Australia to do productions in Australia, and that was starting to work well. Local Australian productions were starting up. A lot of TV was winding up in Melbourne and Sydney mainly. So there was a lot of work flying around at that stage. And Australia then created the freelance industry where you didn't have to join a company. You could sit at home and wait for the phone to ring, and any number of companies might ask you for a day's work or 2 days or a week, maybe even a month or whatever. So we moved into that era, and then suddenly the Australian cinema industry blossomed. And with the wonderful directors, and one of them's here for this festival, Phil Noyce, Peter Weir, there was a little group there that got in and started making films in Australia, and they were written by Australians. And they started to get world acclaim. I was lucky to work on Picnic at Hanging Rock with Peter Weir as a camera operator to the great Russell Boyd. And even that experience with Peter was outstanding, because the way he made the films, his thoughts on the levels of emotion, of a simple story, but he raised it out of that, a simple story, into a wonderfully emotional, complex film about girls who disappear on a mountain in Australia. And it garnered world acclaim, and awards were backed up by it. So suddenly Australia's industry started to really blossom, and we started to make more and more Australian films, feature films. Really, I'm very honest, we didn't know what we were doing, in lots of ways. We had American people who'd worked in America maybe, and they knew the technical side of it. People from England came out, once again more technical than not, because the emotion of the Australian films came from our writers and directors. And it was the likes of that early core of directors who picked it up and ran with it. And we just made the films they wanted to make. And it was quite simple. We didn't feel that America had formulas of shooting, and those formulas we knew about, we could read about them, or as I said, some had worked in America and they came out to Australia and they conveyed this formulaic way of shooting movies, i.e., as a cameraman you had to have a wide shot, a medium shot and a close-up. If you didn't have that, editor couldn't cut it. And the lighting was, you had to have a key light and a fill light and a backlight, and if it didn't have that, it didn't look any good. And they were formulaic systems that the Americans had nurtured and garnered over many, many years prior to the Second World War, and still hung on to after the war and coming out to Australia. But we sort of threw that out and decided that, most of it was made on what we called a what-if system. What if we do it this way? What if we do that? Why don't we do it that? Why should we do it? Why? All what-if system. And that's the way we made those early films in Australia that garnered quite wonderful international awards. And then, of course, those films and those awards and the notices that America and England took of our young directors. Typically, as in America, they immediately say, get him, get her to direct, because look at that film. It was made for, very low budget, was made in a very short amount of time. Get him, get her, bring them over. So Peter Weir went to America and he asked me to go with him to shoot Witness, which was the first film that I did in America. And as usual with America, you have the systems, again, fairly formulaic. That means that, the saying was, once you've been nominated, you never have to worry about work again. in America. And we all got nominated on the first film. So whatever happened then made it possibly a little easier to get work in America and continue work. But what we found, or I found, was that the American system loved the Australian way of working. Nothing was too much trouble. It was everything, there were no dramas. It was like, oh, you want to do that? Okay, give me 10 minutes, I can sort that out. And it was a very lovely, looser way of shooting film for cinema. And the Americans, I think, grabbed onto it. We honoured the schedules, we honoured the budget, because the Australian films, they couldn't afford any overtime. We used to get a cold beer at the end of a day for doing 2 hours of overtime because they didn't have the money. And we knew we had to do the 2 hours because otherwise we wouldn't finish the film on schedule. And you finished on schedule because there was no more money to go over schedule. Once you go to America, it's like you can go 6 months over schedule. You know, that big budgets and schedule killers, they didn't sort of worry too much about that. So what we brought into the American system was an honouring of the budget and the schedule. So that, I think, helped to cement a lot of Australians to the American system in particular, because we could work very easily that way. And I think we still maintain that to a degree. There's an awful lot of Australians now working in America and some through Asia and Europe because of, I think, that learning and that attitude to life. Over the years, having spent, you know, an awful lot of time shooting films in foreign countries, you often would love to have your own crew. But there's lovely crews in foreign countries, and they wouldn't be a professional crew if they didn't know what they were doing. So I found it was when I couldn't take who I wanted, which was often, I found that I could find wonderful filmmakers in crew all around the world. And just a quick example might be George Miller's Mad Max Fury Road. That took 10 years of pre-production to actually end up getting the production rolling. And in that 10 years, the film started, stopped a couple of times. And the Australian crews, when I came on board, replacing the great Dean Semler, who normally would have shot it, but amicably had to part, and George scraped the bottom of the barrel and found I was available. But it you know, the crews, I couldn't get a crew in Australia because the film had started and stopped so many times that they didn't want to say, yes, I'll do Fury Road, because they thought it might crash again and they wouldn't be able to get another job because they'd passed on all the work. So we searched the world, and we took to Namibia in Africa 27 members of the camera crew. It was a big camera crew, and they came from everywhere. They came from Europe, New Zealand, Australia, few from Australia, the Americas and England. They came from everywhere. They said, yeah, I'll do that. And they were great. We put them all, we even had at one stage, in fact, the whole film, we had a Namibian prince, was a young man who wanted to work in films, and he actually was a prince. So we did a lot of bowing, but that's how we put together a lovely, lovely crew, and they made Mad Max. So I found over the years that there wasn't this necessity to drag your own crew around the world with you. So that I jumped the gun there, getting too thick. So, I mean, I went to America and started a run there in America. I thought that I thought that Witness I'd never work in there again. You know, you sort of don't believe that there's a career going to come out of one film, but it did. People liked Witness. I got nominated, and that did start the ball rolling, and had a wonderful life creating those movies you saw clips of, and many others, of course. And it was a wonderful, wonderful time. So I think that if I dig deeper into it as to what I feel that a camera person should bring to a film, I've started to say, you know, that I feel that their approach to that new film should be a new approach. And I always tried, if I could, to take us 3 or 4 months or whatever I could fit in, time off after a film, because they were all out of Australia and I had a family there and they were ensconced in schooling, and we lived in Australia after all, to get back to them. But it was also to clear my brain, to sort of say, that last film, done that, finished that, get it out of my brain. So the next film, as I said earlier, would be the first film I've ever shot. But it went further because there was a changeover back then in more the late 60s, early 70s and into the 80s, where the American system was being phased out even more so, i.e. that we would use one camera to shoot everything, and you'd shoot and then you'd cross shoot as a different shot, you'd do the 3 shot as a different shot. And I got to a film called Rain Man with 2 fabulous actors, Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, obviously. And we got to a scene in the middle of the movie. I'd been shooting with one camera, and we were getting along quite well with that one camera. But all of a sudden we did the scene where the toothpicks fell on the ground and Dustin counted them in a split second, which I still can't believe. But he counted them. And I thought, they're ad-libbing. The 2 actors, they're such great actors, they were ad-libbing. They were well into their characters. And when the camera was rolling, they would ad-lib almost a better reading than the written script that they'd learned, because they were in their characters. And I suddenly thought, this is ridiculous, shooting one camera. We should be using 2 and 3 cameras and covering this, because when they bounce off each other, they're fantastic. And their dialogue, how could we do one camera coverage of, say, Dustin Hoffman ad-libbing, and then you've got to go to the sound man and play all the scene back, write it all down so the reverse could be shot with the matching dialogue coverage. We'd still be there 3 years later. So I went to Barry and I said, Barry, we should be cross-shooting this with 2 cameras. And he looked at me and he said, I wasn't game to ask. I said, give me 3 minutes. And back then, with Panavision, I was always a Panavision man throughout the world because of their world coverage. And we always carried a spare body. Even though we're only shooting with one camera, I carried a spare body in the truck. And it was an emergency in case something broke or something happened to the camera we were using. We had a spare body. So I said to the boys, and the only way we could get that camera out of the truck was to call an emergency. It was a weird system they had. So I said, emergency, emergency, we need another camera in here. And they said, why is that? I said, well, the other one's not working on that angle. We've got to shoot another angle across here at the same time. And they looked at me and they went, oh, I get it. Okay. So I started shooting cross-shooting cameras and never stopped again after that. It was so valuable. I got in a lot of trouble in the system about very dyed-in-the-wool older cameramen saying that I was shooting television for cinema, and that was no. But I thought, no, too many actors, too many editors, too many continuity girls said, oh, we love these cross-shooting cameras because the continuity is perfect. Editors would say to me, I can cut the scene for performance, not continuity. So I used to think, good, that must be helping to make a better film. It helped the actors because the actors were able to overlap and the editor was able to cut it because it was perfect continuity. So all of that made me feel that it was helping to make better films. Forget the TV thing, but it was making better films. So I started using 2 and then 3 and then 4. On Harry Potter, we used 6, 7 or 8. You know, and on Mad Max, we used 15. So it helped, I think, immensely. And the challenge for me was in the fact that I was told that I was shooting television for cinema hurt a little bit because I thought, no, I'm not. I'm making it so it on the big screen in the cinema where people pay $15, $18 to sit down, it'll look good. And that was the challenge, was to make the multiple cross-shooting cameras acceptable in each of their coverage, acceptable to a critical viewer in the audience, that it was still a cinema picture. And I think 4 of them, or 3 of them, were nominated after that, and they were cross-shooting cameras. So I couldn't see any argument in what they were saying was that it was TV for cinema, because if you pick up the challenge to make those cross-shooting cameras work as well as a single shooting camera is another part of it. Keeps you awake all day. You haven't got much time to have a sleep. So I found that work very satisfying because I always loved being a lighting cameraman and an operator. Kept you so close to the film that the director was trying to make. And your talk with the director was very intimate between the lighting and the camera, and what that camera was doing was so intense that one person talking to the director could become a little more valuable than what I found in the earlier days, where you had a camera operator and a director of photography and a director. The American system, the director went to the director of photography and said, I want the shot to start here on a single and track with them to a 2-shot. So then the director of photography walked over to the camera operator and said, we're going to start on a single here and then track down to a 2-shot there. And that's what the operator did, exactly what he was told to do. And when I went over there in 82 to do Witness and other films and used operators, I was so frustrated because they were doing exactly what I asked them to do, but they weren't making the film by being individuals who are looking through the camera, because the camera is shooting the image on the screen that will be on the screen. So they are so much a part of it. You know, in the early days, they said to me, this very, very good cameraman at the ABC, part of the apprenticeship that I had, he said, you know, the camera operator is the only person who's watching the movie before it's finished, because the viewfinder's dark and you have that lovely little coloured image down the bottom, which is anamorphic 185, whatever the format might be, at the bottom of that black tube. And what you're looking at is what will end up on the screen. So you are creating the finished film as you shoot it, as a camera operator. And that's why I stayed camera operating for many, many years, when my friends and colleagues and peers and they all stepped up to being directors of photography, but I stayed down I was camera operator for most of them, because I just loved looking through the camera and working out how to try and make the film better or do it or get it right for the director, who was trying to get his side of it right off the written script. So you have this pattern of responsibility coming down and ending up on the camera person who's looking through the camera, basically, because In those early days, no monitors, no, you know, the first thing the director would say would be cut, cut. How was it? To the camera operator, because he was the one making the film that would end up on the big screen. And so I had a very funny thing in those early days where that responsibility was a big burden to carry, because sometimes when you're watching through a camera and you're watching the movie through the camera, you see maybe where an actor might not be relating to the actor that he's talking to, but he's read the script. And his answer is he didn't listen to the other actor. He just said the line that he'd learned out of the script. And it became quite an intense thing to be looking through the camera at a performance and think, he's read the script. So that it wasn't quite maybe 100%. And I found I was able to go to the director and they'd say, how was it, how was it? And I'd turn very quietly so the actor couldn't hear, and I'd say, I think he's read the script. And he'd go, thanks. We'll do another one. And no blame, no names or anything. It was just, we'll do another one. But the director was now aware. And it was all because, we talked about it later, the director and I, it was all because of the intimacy that the camera operator was having with the actor at that particular point of time. And I found that to be one of the greatest work jobs you could ever get, was trying to make the actor's world as safe and as comfortable to keep them in character as possible. Because I don't know whether there's some actors here, but they're weird people. They really are weird. I mean, they are a certain person. But when they come to work on a film, they have to become somebody else. And some of them are method actors and couldn't hit a mark to save their life. Some of them are trained theatre actors who want marks to hit. That's their training. So you're working with the different attitudes of actors towards their profession. And I think that, again, the cameraman, the lighting cameraman and the camera operator particularly needs, I feel, to feel for them, because they are the film. You know, if you can get it right with the actor and the editor can cut it and the music man you've got maybe a great emotional film. And it's a big, big part, I feel, of the camera operator. He or she is not just pointing a camera at actors. They're recording a movie that's going to be seen by thousands of people, and whatever that actor's doing, you know, portraying a particular character, needs to come off that screen and into the audience. Because I think, again, pushing that to further bounds, the audience needs to be in the film, not watching it. And over the years we've talked about this, that can you drag an audience out of their seat and take them through that virtual window into another world that we've created? Get them in that world so they're in it. They're actually in it. They're not watching it. And keep them there. Because keeping them there is the hardest thing to do, I think, for a director, because that whatever emotional pitch they have out of the script, the screenplay, the writing, they need to portray onto a screen through the actors, through the camera, and then back again, and to keep them up there, held in that movie, is probably one of the hardest things to do. And I've worked with a lot of great directors, very privileged to have done that. And they are, because when you work very closely with them, they can't help but tell you these wonderful little... It's like Peter Weir. I mean, Peter Weir from Australia has to be one of the, I feel, greatest directors ever born. And everybody I know wishes he'd go on and make more films. But he would say at a certain point, there's an audience and we're making the film up here. He'd say, I wonder where I've got my audience. And he turns literally around and looks into the audience to see where they are watching the film that he's going to complete. And he wants to know whether or not, they're laid back and they're just eating popcorn. In other words, bored. The film hasn't grabbed them. Or are they, sitting up a little bit, intense, a little more intense? Or are they sitting forward in the seat? Or are they up here? Where has he got them emotionally with what he's doing up there, what he's presenting up there in vision and sound? Where are the audience? Are they in the movie or are they back there just watching? And I had a lovely example of it when we did a film in America with Wolfgang Petersen, The Perfect Storm. And when the storm, I was in LA shooting something and they had the premiere and it was in a big, big theatre. There were a lot of people there. And we quickly grabbed seats wherever we could when the movie started, first time it was being shown to an audience, and a big audience. And I sat down and there was this woman beside me and I don't know who she was. She wasn't a crew person. She was just a stranger. And the film started and, it rocked it along, establishing people, the boats. And then the boats went to sea and they went fishing and whatnot. Then the storm started. And as the storm started, I could sense she was getting agitated. And she was sort of, she was starting to get very agitated. And I thought, we've got her in the movie. And then about 2 minutes later, she turned to me and she said, can I hold onto your arm? And I said, hang on tight. But she didn't know who I was, that I'd worked on the film. I said, hang on tight, we've got a rough ride ahead of us. Her fingernails dug into me so deeply, like I had little bruises there. And I thought to myself later, that's how you make good movies. You get the audience in there. Get them in that film, not watching it, in it. And hold them there for as long as you can. And that was quite an example of it that came to me, quite late, but as part of thoughts and ideas I'd had over the years working with these great directors, and all of them with their lovely little ways of making the films that they were famous for, were all quite different. That's why I have to be very honest with students all around the world to say there is no formula. There's no secret. Often in America, doing a lecture, and people would say, thank you for telling us all your secrets. And I'd say, what do you mean, secrets? They're not secrets. How could they be secrets? They're just the way I hope I'm making films or helping to make films the right way. But they're not secrets. And I'd say, well, why did you say that? Why did you thank me for my secrets? And they said, oh, well, a lot of cameramen do have secrets. And when they ask a question, they often get I can't tell you, I can't talk about, that's my secret to my profession. And I used to think, what are you scared of? You're the professional. Do you think the student, because she knows how you shot the last film, is going to take your job away from you? I don't think so. So I just pour it all out and let it go, because every film is different and should be approached differently mentally by you as a camera person. You might have done 40 odd films or 50 or 60, but you shouldn't take the last one to the next one. And that's where I feel that discussions like this, I hope, help. One must remember, though, in all honesty, that my approach to it is the way I chose to do it. It's not necessarily anybody else's as a filmmaker. As a camera person, it's such a fantastic job. Basically interpreting the script that is interpreted then by the director, who then wants to visually put it up there on the screen, so that every film has to be different, I feel. If it isn't, then it's a rubber stamp movie, and you've just rubber stamped it. And as a cameraman, I don't think it's right to do that. I think every film, if you're really enthusiastic about making films, that every film should be a new challenge, because especially if it's a new director, more so. A couple of times in America, other cameramen would say to me, "Oh, I love working with so-and-so because I know what they're thinking. I can get it for them." And I used to think to myself, fire him. Get somebody who doesn't know what you're thinking, because it's the energy of that new frame, it's the energy of the new film that should be put up there on the screen, not a rubber stamp from a film, the last one or the last three. I didn't think that was right. So I got more and more adamant. As I went on through the industry, I got more and more adamant about definitely being going into any new job with an absolutely clear mind that this is the first film I've ever done. And it comes out very easily, really, if you listen to the directors, because I can name drop a little bit, but in pre-production for The Firm with Sidney Pollack, and Sidney was a great man, great director, actor, great to work with, very dominant man, but that was good because decisions were made very clearly and concisely. It was very good. But when you consider the fact that in most big productions that I've been involved in, the director's starting very early in the process, of course, generally with the production designer. So those two get together and they might travel around, find all the locations, or, you know, a great number of them, choices of them, and start designing the sets that are on those locations as to how they fit into the film, the written film. And then months later, you arrive. You arrive as the camera person who's going to record all this. And you're behind the eight ball a little bit because they've already done all that. And when you look at, maybe sometimes you look at the set that's been built somewhere and you think, hang on a minute, you know, wouldn't it be nice if it was turned around the other way because the sun's going to get... And it wasn't thought of, or it did later, in later years it did come in, but in the early years it wasn't thought of. And you'd walk in and, oh, the light would be awful. Then you'd have to live with because you couldn't turn the set round. So you came along a little later. So I found that a lot of as soon as I arrived on pre-production, I just had to do a lot of listening to find out where their brains were. What had they developed? What had they established for that film, this new film I was working on? And Sidney turned to me during pre-production and he said, "You don't talk much, do you?" And I said, "No, Sidney, I'm listening. So I hope that when I do open my mouth and I start talking, it's sensible." And he looked at me, turned away and went on. We got on famously for the film. He was wonderful. And later, you know, afterwards, you know, we kind of, because he was a very dominant man, as you know, he liked to dominate. But if you stood up to him just that with the logics built in that would be beneficial to his film, then he understood what you were getting at. and accepted that completely. So you as a camera person, again, you need to be able to listen, I feel, to what they have planned. Too many times as a camera operator, I saw lighting cameramen arguing with directors about what angle to shoot, how to shoot it, you know, how the edit would go, and arguing for almost hours. And I used to think about that and think, when I become a lighting cameraman as well, I think I might favour the director. Because sometimes the director wants to shoot this alleyway, that way, because it's filthy and grubby and the light's no good, it's miserable. And you look that way and it's backlit and it looks lovely. So, and that's exactly what the argument was between these two. I went off to the camera truck and had a sleep for an hour, waiting for them to work out which way they'd shoot it. But I always thought to myself, in the end, I'd like to shoot it the way the director wants it, where the alleyway is the story, the grubby, dirty alleyway, the dark one. That's where it was. Perfect example might be again with Peter Weir on Mosquito Coast with Harrison Ford, that he said to me, he said, "Johnny, I do not want this jungle to be pretty." In the story, he wants to go into the jungle. It's a dirty, filthy, greasy, black jungle. Nobody would go in there except the character Ali Fox, played by Harrison. Nobody. That was the story, was that nobody would go into that jungle. They wouldn't. The family, the wife, the kids thought it was greasy, black, dirty jungle. And back then, on film, we had 3 negatives. We had the Eastman Kodak negative, we had the Fuji, and we had the Agfa. In the tests, because the negative played a very big role in the look of the film. Could correct that with filters, but didn't want to carry filters for everything, just to change the colour. The Fuji stock, or I'll go Agfa, the Agfa stock was beautiful. It loved the greens and it made the jungle look beautiful. But that's not what Peter wanted. So we looked at Fuji, and the Fuji was fantastic. It was a genuine 500 ASA, so I had a good high-speed stock, and it was ugly. It did not like the greens, and it made them drab, an olive green instead of a lovely, beautiful, sparkling green. So we went for the Fuji stock. And again, there was another technical lesson learnt out of that film, was that the Fuji stock was a genuine 500 ASA stock, whereas the Kodak was more a 400 and the Agfa was a 250. I needed a lot of light under the canopy in the jungles, even at midday, that's so dark under the canopy, that I was opening up and opening up and opening up all the time. And the Fuji allowed me to do it because it was a genuine 500 ASA stock. So I shot the whole film on Fuji. 1, so the colour would match. And 2, because back then we had to carry loads of magazines full of film of the slow speed daylight stock, and then we had masses of magazines for the high speed stock for under the canopy or at night or dusk. So we had a truck full of magazines full of different film, and that annoyed me. So I said to the boys, we're going to shoot the whole film on the Fuji stock, just carry Fuji stock, no other stock. That's our high speed stock, and we'll neutral density it down for the daylight footage. And so I get to doing lectures on the film after we finished it, but the questions I got, particularly in America and Europe, about it was, what do you mean? You shot high-speed negative on a beach at midday? And I said, yeah, looked all right, didn't it? And they said, but that stock's not used for that. I said, why not? It worked. And they said, but it isn't, you don't use it for that, you use it for night work. I said, well, I used it on the beach. They said, well, how did you do that? How'd you make that work? It still looked all right. I said, well, 85 ND9 was a filter I used, I think. Put that in, and it brought the ASA back to a usable ASA on a beach at midday. So I found that, you know, we had the one stock, then after that we could just rock through the day. As it got dark, the stock was already in the camera. All I had to do was take the neutral densities out, and the ASA had come screaming up to 500 ASA, and I could keep shooting under any conditions. And therein lies, I felt, another lesson that I was learning was keeping the actor comfortable, because to change the stocks meant reloading cameras. It was a delay, and I found over the years that delaying actors means they wander off and they lose the intensity often of the character they've got built in. And they lose it, and they've got to find it again. They've got to wind themselves back up again. So being able to speed up by using a high-speed negative the whole time, I felt helped the actor, which might help the film. And there came another revelation, was that zoom lenses. I started to use zoom lenses when they weren't accepted because they didn't have the quality of a prime lens. And this carryover of the American formulaic system was one camera and a prime lens, always a prime lens. But I found that changing prime lenses again was a delay that made the actors feel, got to wait, they take a lens out, put a new one in, put the little gizmos on it for the focus, and check that and do that, have a look at that, yep, that's all right. Put the matte box back on, make sure the filter's clean. That was all part of the lens change. And the actors sitting there really would love to be doing another take quickly. So I thought, if the quality of the zoom lens isn't quite right and doesn't match the prime, why don't I use the zoom lens all the way through the movie? Then the quality won't change. Same with the negative. Same negative, nothing changes. So I thought, I'll try that. So I started using the zoom. Well, I got into trouble for that as well, that you can't use zoom lenses to make movies, but, you know, I did, and they were all right. They were all right. So all of that was part of this trying to make a production as accomplished as possible that the director wanted, and was satisfactory for the visuals of the film, for personal reasons and for an audience reasons, but also to try and keep the actor as comfortable on the set as possible, working as quickly as possible. And to be able to do a take and then a director say, Johnny, can we run that tracking shot again, but make it tighter? Go in. And the zoom lens, right to go. As quick as that. Actor goes back to the mark and you haven't lost a single second changing lenses to get that. And I felt that was worth more than, you know, trying to obey the quality of the photographic result. To me, I threw a lot of that out. I hope and felt to make the film or the set more comfortable for the actors. I got rid of marks on the floor because the actor, often I'd be operating a camera and I'd watch the actor come through a door and have to walk through and stop on a mark. And you'd watch the actor, and I could tell the first 2/3 of the walk across the room, the actor was more worried about hitting the mark than playing the part. And I thought, no, this is not right. You know, so I'd say, listen, if I take that mark away, and don't you worry about just hit anywhere in that area there. Because you see, when it was black and white lighting, which I came into early, that was Fresnel lighting, hard lights for keys and fills and backlight formula that you had to have. They were Fresnel lights, and the actors had to hit a mark so that all the lights worked exactly at that mark. But when we moved into colour, it went from Fresnel lighting to bounce. So more lights were the lights, I always say, went from shooting the actor that way and slowly went up and bounced off polystyrene or a white, or the ceiling of the room, whatever it was. And the light slowly went like that. So black and white, colour. And as that light became more saturated over a bigger area, you didn't need marks. So I'd rub the marks out, and the focus pullers almost strung me up because they wanted the marks to get sharp focus. And I used to say, challenges, young man, challenges. You know, put marks down, but they're not actors' marks. Put focus marks down, but not actors' marks. And so a lot of actors would come in and they'd say, where's my mark? And I'd say, anywhere in that metre square there, or 3 foot square in America. Anywhere in there. And they'd say, no mark? I'd say, no, just hit that. Focus puller's fine. He's in an asylum, but he's okay. Just hit there. Well, it opened up on some films a freedom again for the actor. They didn't have to worry about hitting the marks. And I really felt that, you know, the zoom lens, the high-speed negative, the throwing away of marks, I hope in the past films has helped make them an acceptably watchable film. And a film that I hope that in the Peter Weir syndrome has helped to suck audiences up into our film and be actually in there, not just watching it. I think that, to me, is the bottom line of helping to make films as a camera person, is to try and do that, to try and get the audience up into there by any way or means you can, technically or on the set. I used to watch actors with the clapperboard, and, you know, some actors, the clapperboard would be in front of their face, and the clapper boys, they they'd always yell, 386, take one, bang, gone. And the actor would be going like that. So I'd go up to them and I'd say, the clapperboard, does that worry you? And they'd say, I hate it. You know, and I'd say, okay, end slate. So then we'd work an end slate for that actor. And other actors would say, I'd love it. The noise doesn't worry me, but I can hide behind it. For that little time it takes before the slate clears, they can find their character. And without the sound worrying them, they're hidden. And they can dig deep into their character. And when that clears, they're on. So we do front slates for them and end slates for the ones who didn't like it. And all of that, I hope, helped, because the actor's life is a hard one. It's a hard one. And I think anything we could do, especially the changeover from the American formulaic system of marks and Fresnel lighting, and to single cameras, prime lenses, get rid of all of that and make it a more versatile, far more versatile work area for them to actually be actors, strut their stuff in front of the camera, and, you know, you want to do another take, straight back, make it tighter, done. Things like that, I think, helped when we had film negative. It's even better now, obviously, with pixel cameras, much better. You can roll just through, you don't have to worry about so much problematically anymore, but that's a whole new world. Are there any questions on any of that? I might help, need a bit of help. Do they have a mic? Do you have a mic? Somebody.
Hi, sir. Welcome to India. I have a question. Technically, virtual production and so many things are into the cinema. Since you are working in film, now it is a digital era. Yeah, can I come there?
No, just slow down. I have a sunburnt Australian brain.
Yeah, I understand. So you are working from film era, now it is digital era. So now how you are facing your film things upgraded to digital era with relevant to the virtual production, Unreal Engine, so many things. And another question is, this is one question. Another question is, have you tried film lenses with the digital camera? Like a bayonet mount, a 2 PL mount.
Can somebody help me there?
Okay, I'll ask slowly, sir. My first question is, yeah.
Hi. I'll just tell what he was saying. He's asking that since you have worked on the film sets from when the camera had to have so many changes physically, so how have you dealt with the transition to the digital camera?
No. That is not my question. You're wrong. Sir, you're working from film time till digital era. You're working for so many films, okay?
Yeah.
So, my question is that transformation affects you? Because nowadays, people are using virtual production, Unreal Engine, and so many indoor production. That is virtual filmmaking. Is it affecting you? Because you are from the film time.
So you're asking about the changeover between
Yes.
film negative to
Yes.
pixel LED, pixel.
Yes, film
cameras.
era to digital era. This is one question. And second question is, have you tried film lenses to digital lenses, like positive lock lenses? Have you tried with the banded mount lenses to positive lock lenses?
The lenses for the digital cameras.
Yes, like Arri Flex 35 or Arri Flex 65 or those kind of lenses. Have you used in digital era, like now we are using positive lock lenses? Thank you.
The first question is most interesting because out of all of the films, the only 2 films I ever did on a digital camera was Mad Max Fury Road and George's little film called 3,000 Years of Longing, because I didn't do Furiosa. But all the films before that were done on film negative. And it was a beautiful image result out of those cameras and film stocks. And as I said a little earlier, there was lovely games playing with different negatives and filtration that made cinematography really photography. So when I went into Mad Max, and George Miller is one of the most interesting directors ever, in that Warner Brothers said, George, we want to make it 3D and shoot it in 3D. So George's wonderful filmmaking mind says, okay, but I have shots in the film that no 3D camera built in the world today can do. So I'll build my own. So he started building 3D cameras that would fit through the window of the war rig truck, or it would go down through the sky roof. It would fit through the window and fit inside the truck, because most of the 3D cameras were so big with their 2 lenses and all of that sort of stuff. So when I came on board, his way of thinking, again, was amazing, because when you change a lens on a 3D camera, you've got to change 2 lenses, and then you have to match them up optically, perfectly. And it's a long process. It can take 30 minutes to change a lens. So when George got hold of this, he said, I can't have that much time wasted on the set. So they decided they'd build a 3D camera body for every lens. So there were 24 cameras, all with a different lens in them. So when you changed the lens, you just unplugged the whole camera and took it away and brought the camera in that had the 50mm in it, or the 75 or the 100 or whatever. And it was amazing thinking, but they did it. And when I got there were cameras all over the floor. But they had a lot of electronic problems, overheating and stuff, and we were battling. Then at the last minute, George swung over to 2D. So we went with the Arris. The Arris at that stage, I'd been following all of the periodicals that wrote articles on the latest latest digital cameras, and I knew that the Arri was battle proven on film sets in deserts and where we were going. So I figured that was good. And I'd been a Panavision man all my life, so I went to them, and the lenses were a restricted variety of lenses, but I had certain lenses left over from film work that I really loved, and I said, can those plug into that digital thing? And they said, yep, we'll make all that work. I said, great, just make all those work. So again, I wasn't that overly, some people, and it's lovely to read and see, some people spend a long time choosing lenses and zooms and things to make to add to their work. This lens makes that scene or night work makes it look really lovely, and these lenses make the day work lovely, and that zoom does this. And I could never understand that. I just wanted a box of lenses to go shoot the movie, not worry about changing them for a look. So I found that by just changing over the film lenses into the digital camera, under the guidance of that fantastic Panavision backroom boys, Dan Sarsky and lens maker. He made special lenses for us for Fury Road. They were little zoom lenses I knew were in a back shelf at Panavision in Los Angeles. Nobody ever used them, and I knew they were there. And I said, can we turn those into Mad Max Fury Road lenses, put them in there? And Dan Sarsky preset the focus at a hyperfocus to suit the interior of the cab of the truck, so that I knew that even at wide open 2.8, we had 2 feet to 8 feet depth of field, so that hyperfocal distance was preset on all the lenses. So if it was daylight and I had more stop, say T8 inside, T5.6, we had more depth of field. But down to 2.8, reduced it, but we still had the focus within the cab. So the 4 lenses were all set up for that. So I found that by just adapting, the other lenses were perfectly capable of doing a Mad Max. And I read now about how people, as I said, select special lenses and things. I don't know. That's their bag. I think if I was still shooting, I wouldn't worry too much about that. I feel that the bottom line is just go make the movie. Once in Australia, I did a very low budget little feature film for a man. We had no money, but we desperately wanted to shoot it on 35mm instead of 16mm film negative. And to get the 35mm camera, I was allowed one body. It was a camera called an X, Panavision X camera. It was a dreadful machine to shoot with, and one lens, a zoom lens that we thought would cover all scenes in the movie. That's all we had, was the camera and the lens, and we shot the whole movie. So I sort of felt that if you can shoot a movie with one camera and one little lens, after that it's the writing and the directing, and it's whether you've got hold of the audience is what the movie's all about, not the photography. So I sort of tended to go a little bit leaner about that. So I didn't worry about it when I came over to Mad Max. And the same with 3,000 Years of Longing. We changed the lenses to suit the film, of course. You don't really need an 11:1 zoom on a film like 3,000 Years of Longing, but you do on Mad Max. So that sort of changed, but the actual, they weren't even back then. I mean, Mad Max was 12 years ago now. So back then they weren't making all these specialised lenses, so I didn't have much of a choice anyway. But I found that moving over onto a digital camera on Mad Max, you know, my security blanket was light meters, spot meter and an incident meter that I used all through the film negative shooting, and that was my security blanket. I couldn't take them off. And people would come up and say, but you're shooting digital, what are you wearing light meters for? I'd say, well, it's like, what's his name's thumb? He's got to have his thumb in his mouth for security. So, but I found it did work, because there were many, many times when we got travelling in the trucks across the desert, we just kept rolling because the digital camera allowed that. So we lost sight of the DIT man in his truck who was controlling my exposure onto his monitors, and we lost him. And we'd go into a shadow behind a sandhill or something, so I'd pull the meters out. We re-rated the digital cameras from a factory rating of 800 ASA. We re-rated it down to 400, which gave us another stop. And the DIT man was very much more comfortable with that for final post-production work. So I was able to set the meter on 400 and just threw it in the air, and I'd yell at all of our 3 or 4 cameras that were rolling, and I was able to just say, make it 5.6, and it'd be in the ballpark. But I found that the digital cameras were amazing. I mean, their latitude, their ability to shoot in low light areas, everything about them was a dream come true after battling through 40 years of film negative, where, you know, very low ASA ratings in jungles or at night work in New York City or Venice, shooting Venice at night on the canals, and you've only got 250 ASA, and you'd love to have, you know, 1600, which the digital cameras, their low light level acceptance is just crazy, and they're wonderful, and I wish everybody working with them all the best, because they've got a fabulous piece of equipment there, and it allows a whole new, I can see, I think, in the industry, a changeover from the lighting of feature films to almost an enhancement of available light for the modern digital film. Because I found on 3,000 Years of Longing that really you set the camera up really quickly and had a look at the scene as available light, and then put lights in to enhance that to suit the film, rather than with in the film negative days, you had to light it. There was just sort of no question, and you know, you started talking to gaffers about a whole heap of lights everywhere to bring everything up to a usable level of aperture to shoot the film satisfactorily or to get depth of field that you needed. Things like that. So I'm watching the new young people coming in using digital cameras, and some of the stuff they're doing for TV series where you're shooting, I don't know, 20, 30, 40 setups a day is extraordinarily lovely stuff they're shooting, really good stuff. And I think it's the ability of the camera and the lenses that are doing that. With the hat. But if you can...
Can you hold it? John, this is me right here in front of you. On your right, on the wheelchair.
Okay, you win.
Yes, okay. So my name's Rustam Rasti Irani. I am from Mumbai. I'm a writer, filmmaker, and I've shot stuff from my wheelchair. I've used it as a wheelchair dolly. So my question to you is, the term cinematographer is now thrown so liberally. And I personally believe like you only earn that like an airline pilot. You need at least hundreds of thousands of hours, if not like the same amount of film and work to get to where you are. And so that's how people will trust you with their lives. And a cinematographer is like a pilot who is going to land the plane safely and get you there. So coming to the question, it's a level of trust between a director and a cinematographer. And I believe that it also comes from the idea of the dailies. Do the dailies still exist in this era of digital films? Do we still have, at the end of the day, wait anxiously to see how it turned out? And, or is it just relegated to sending it to the studio bosses and have them have a look at it, and that's all it's been reduced to?
Very good question. It'll take another 3 hours. It's a very good question, actually, because, I've found a new career in life other than film. So I'm watching very closely now. Again, carrying it off from the other question about the use of the digital cameras and their ability to shoot in low light level, I do know and I do agree that I'm reading in the industry and hearing in the industry that there's no ladder to climb anymore. In those early days when I came into it, you climbed a ladder of apprenticeship from I was a car driver who drove the guys around to set up and help them set up cameras, but wasn't part of the camera crew really. I earned that a year later, and I got a job as a clapper loader. And then I moved up to focus pulling and did that for a year or two. Then I did camera operating for 10 or 15 years, or the rest of my life. And then moved up to being a director of photography or a cinematographer, I prefer to call them. So there was a ladder, and that ladder is going away very quickly, as suggested. And I'm sad to say I think it's true as well. I'm not involved in it now, so I have to really read about it. But I have my agent in America. I became very good friends with her, and we talk a lot. She comes to Australia a lot, and she is basically saying the same thing, that the director of photography is fading away. And I hear on the grapevine that a lot of times that the cinematographer is being called an illusionist, that you create the images, but is it photography is the big question. I think that's a question to be answered in each individual's mind as to whether or not it still is photography, creating then moving into then cinematography. But the word illusionist is pretty hard. I heard that on a film in Australia there was a certain first assistant director racing around telling camera operators and the director of photography, don't worry about any of that, you're only pixel collectors, throw them all in the bucket and they'll be sorted out in post. is fairly devastating. So there are big moves at the moment about where we are, where we stand. There was a funny example in America when I was nominated for Fury Road, but we're up against the great Chivo with Revenant, who got the award, and rightly so. But it was at that moment where Bob Richardson there, he wanted a separate award and category for proper cinematography films that he was shooting, film negative, right through post on film, no digital post at all on film. And he wanted a category for people who do that and get an award for that. And then Roger Deakins was there for Sicario, and he suggested that we have another award for animation because he was doing a lot of lighting for animated films. So he wanted an award for that. And Ed Lackman was there with Carol. And when it came to my turn, I said to Ed, well, I don't know, Ed, what would you have as a thing? He said, I'll have a Scotch and Dry on the rocks. I said, I'll have the same. Because it was all a bit silly, you know, you'd end up with about 7 different awards, and, you know, is cinematography still photography? It's a very big question. It's a very big question, and as I said, I think each individual needs to absorb it. I found that with George on Fury Road and on 3,000 Years of Longing, yes, it was true. I could work very hard to create the image that I felt the film deserved, but I knew deep down that George and Eric Whip, who was the post image supervisor, he would change it. I knew that. So I put effort into it, yes, but I knew it would be changed. And I wasn't a part of that either a lot because I just wasn't able to get there. George's posts are very long, very long. He takes a lot of time in post. And so unless you go in there every day, you're not going to be able to keep up with the input into the post and then the output back out to grading. So I found that I would go in every month or so and have a look at what they've done. But George and Eric did really the majority of the final results of those films, and I could see that if you've got the money, it's a lot of money. You can't have those boys sitting there for a year grading a picture unless you've got a lot of money. So I think for the bigger budget films, this problem can occur for cameraman, but I think for a lower budget picture, I think they haven't got the money to do that. So I think the cameraman then needs to knuckle down and create the image that is suitable and proper for the film that he's recording. So I think it may depend on budget or how much post you've got, how much demand the director has and the producers have on the final image being manipulated in post, or how much, also the inroads now of Zoom screens, we used those on 3,000, they're amazing. I mean, we were going to shoot 3,000 Years of Longing in London, Istanbul and Sydney. And in the end, COVID took over and we didn't go to London, we didn't go to Istanbul. We shot the whole lot in Sydney and nobody can tell. Even the sound boys doing the music on the final result of 3,000 Years of Longing thought that the bus travelling shot was done in Istanbul, but it wasn't. It was Zoom screens in a factory in Australia. So that gave me an idea that the whole of filmmaking is changing. We see write-ups on Dune big film set in the desert. They're done on the soundstage, and a bit of sand up to the zoom screen, and the zoom screen takes over, and it creates an ambient light as well on the set, so it's brilliant to work with. You can put a roof in that they can then join up with the wall zooms. It's just incredible. And the advances are weekly. I mean, every week something new comes out that's going to give the image maker, a better way to make his image. But it is a very, very long and difficult question, I think, to answer as to how it'll go, or how a certain camera person is going to approach the new digital world.
Hello, sir.
So we have time for one last question. Make it a good one.
Hello, sir. I am Sagar. I am filmmaker. I have recently completed my first feature film as a director. So my question is, what advice would you give a director to communicate their vision effectively to the cinematographer?
To communicate the
director's vision to the cinematographer. That is the best for a director.
Well, as Sidney Pollack said, you don't talk a lot, do you? It's a wonderful, wonderful part of the filmmaking process. I always say to students, if you haven't shot the film the director wants in your head during pre-production, you're going to be behind the 8 ball. It's like flying an aeroplane. If you're behind the aeroplane, you're likely to crash. You've got to be in front of the aeroplane, and you have to be in front of the camera all the time, because the more work you do in pre-production with the director, looking at pictures, talking, looking at locations, the light, what's happening to suit that film, is the criteria. But doing all of that and getting it, the image of your film and the director's film in your brain, locked in to shoot the film, I think is essential. Then what happens is you get onto the location, and when you surveyed it and the sun was over there and it was beautiful and it was backlit to there and he wanted that and the people would, and it was, you get there and it's raining. And they suddenly say, like on Rain Man, we went across America on Rain Man, and we surveyed it, and we literally just drove through towns. Yeah, that town looks good. Keep driving. Because the way we shot the movie and the way Barry Levinson, as our director, said to me, because I said to him, I said, Barry, I've got to talk to you during pre-production. What do you need? What do you need? What do you see the film we're making for you? How do you see the images? And he went, well, he said, it's a contemporary movie. We're going to drive across America shooting it. We're going to get there and we'll have to shoot with what we've got, whatever's there. I said, right. He said, so let's go. I said, okay. And that's the way we shot the movie. And there was one particular day we arrived and the scene was set outside on the highway. Even though I don't know what it was, they were arguing about something. And it was raining. And over the road was this rundown little motel with a little blinking light on it, no vacancy. And he said, let's set it in that motel. So they raced across the road, grabbed the guy and said, you got no vacancy? He said, yeah, I didn't want anybody in there today. So they said, well, it's empty. He said, yeah, we want to shoot a movie in there. All right, go for it. So we ended up inside, and the scene in the movie is in a motel room that on film, had to be shot standing on the balls of your feet like a boxer. That, suddenly it's like, oh, where will they be? Oh, well, Dustin will sit there and Tom will wander around here and kick something down. He's cranky about something and he'll kick it over. Oh, okay, so what, a wide shot from here? Yeah, this looks good. And then we'd quickly race in and light it. And it's that sort of thing that I try to say to students that, much as you plan in pre-production and get the film shot in your head, you're going to get caught out. So, but by having it in your head, then when you get caught out, you know the gist of the film that you've wanted to make visually and how to make that fit in so it all slides through nice and smoothly. And that I think is why you should try and get ahead in pre-production and shoot it in pre-production. Because then I mean, I love shooting on the balls of my feet, but I feel I learned it from being at the ABC, working my way up the ladder of experience, watching cameramen do that and realising that that's going to happen, that you're going to get caught out and suddenly you haven't surveyed this. Your gaffer doesn't know where the generator can go with the cables. Not that they use those anymore, which is another great thing. But, you're not ready for it. But you've got to be ready in your mind. And you've got to be able to make decisions for the crew. You've got a big crew there. You've got, well, say on Rain Man, you've got two actors like Dustin Hoffman and Tom Cruise, two of the best actors in America, and you've got them there and you've got to make it work. And you've got to shoot it in that day because the next day we're 200 miles down the road shooting in another town, and you've got to shoot it on that day. And it's got to fit in, it's got to work, and it's got to work for the actors, the ambience of it, and all that's got to work. So by doing it in pre-production and having everything ready in your brain, then when you're caught out, you can actually handle it a lot better. So I always try and say to people, when you're in pre-production, don't waste a second of it. And another example is Perfect Storm. I had 3 months pre-production on that, and I used every second of it. Every scene, I had to work out where the cameras could go. Could they get there? Because the storyboard artist, he's just got a piece of paper and a pen. He can draw, the camera can go from this looking at the front of a 20-metre trawler fishing boat. He can look at the front of that and go 90 metres down and around. So I'd race over to the big tank we had at Warner Brothers, ginormous tank with a big trawler in it, and I'd start measuring it, and we didn't have any equipment that could do that shot. So I had to go and say, I'm sorry, cannot do that shot in the storyboard. So Wolfgang Peterson was a good, solid, early film director, brought up through the ladder. And he just said, okay, we fix that, I'll fix that, that's my job. So we worked out 2 shots, and he put a cut in the middle, and the camera could do the first one, do a quick cut, and then go back to then we could place the second. The cranes were floating in the water. We could put the second crane down and complete the storyboard shot. So it's all of that sort of preparation that you have to try and work out in pre-production. Another big example on that film was the cameras were going to get wet out on the end of the cranes. We knew that because waves and rain were going to go over the top of the cameras. So all they had in LA were big waterproof camera bodies. They were so big they couldn't go on the crane. We couldn't do anything. We had no equipment. We didn't have time to build solid waterproof housings. So we went for soft housings, and we put double zippers in them, had them made, and we put double zippers in them to try and stop the water getting in. And then I thought, why don't we raise the air pressure inside the bag? So I had a fantastic camera assistant, Trevor Loomis, first assistant camera, and I said, Trev, how can we raise the air pressure in the bag? And he said, well, we'd have to use hospital air, clean air, because otherwise it'd have to be a certain temperature, because otherwise it'll fog the filter in the plate, waterproof plate in the front when we change the cameras. But not out there. I don't want to do it out there, because if a battery goes flat out there, that means we've got to swing the whole thing in, take the battery off, put another one on, and you've got 4 or 5 of America's top actors standing out in the boat on the middle of the set, and they're wet, they're cold, and they want to resign every 2 minutes. So we've got to speed things up. So Trev said, righto, we'll run the cable to a variac. We can change the cameras quick, slap those on, change the cable, put the cables in. We'll run the 24-volt cable, the 16-volt cables. I said, all right, run 2 of each. So if one gets run over underwater by the wheels of the thing and fractures, we don't have to run another cable. So we've got 2 spare cables for 2 spare voltages. And then when we change cameras, we just change. Trev did a fantastic job of organising all of that. And the water went over the cameras. We only lost 1 camera, and that was due to a ridiculous, stupid fault by a young man in the visual effects section who turned a 100-mile-an-hour wind blower onto the camera, and it was on a crane, and the crane boys couldn't hold it, and it spun the crane around and smashed it against the drop tank and smashed the housing. So we lost a camera there, but that was all right. We had a couple of spares, and but we didn't lose a single camera through water. And there was times when that camera went underwater, solid water, and it got a little bit of water in it, but the extra air pressure, all of that is pre-production thinking, but it's not. That's the practicalities of equipment need to be taken into account for a film like that. But other films without that sort of action that needs big equipment, like a film like Dead Poets Society is you know, Peter Weir again came to me and he said, Johnny, he said, we're not slow coming from Australian training of shooting film. We're not slow, but I've got to move along really quickly for Dead Poets Society. He said, I've got 8 characters, 7 boys and a girl. And he said, I want to cover it. So in edit, I've got the material I want with the editor to create the flow of emotion between those 7 guys and a girl in the film. I said, righto, let's go. And we ended up, we averaged, and it was 1 camera back then on a Zoom, but 1 camera. We averaged 21 and a half setups a day for the entire film. Now, Peter made it hard on the actors. He said to everybody, he said, we're going to move along on this picture. Take 1, print. And you'll have to have a really good reason why you want another take. He said, we'll do it, but it'd have to be a damn good reason, really good reason. And that's the way he worked the film. And we didn't have a monitor. So Peter was always standing where the next camera setup would be. And he'd say, cut. How was it? And I'd say, good. He'd say, camera's here. Shooting that, 2 shot. Camera went straight. They couldn't believe it. The producers couldn't believe it, that Peter worked that way and yet made a wonderfully emotional film like Dead Poets Society so quickly and so well thought out, so well performed with the boys. And basically nearly every shot is take 1 and print. So then there again comes in this, I feel, the pre-production training of being able to shoot fast. Make the movie, don't shoot the photography, just make the movie, because you'll be remembered for a good movie. And I'm afraid I've often used with students a rather hard-line saying that I've said, that brilliant photography never saved a bad script. It's the script that's going to make the movie. And I feel, in all honesty, deep down now that I don't work in the industry anymore, but I can say these things. That most of the films here, I shot the film. And it's like working with Peter on Dead Poets. Let's go. Because to give Peter the material to have in edit to get the emotion of the film he wants was more important than me shooting a beautiful picture. To me, it was go shoot the movie. So I feel that the bottom line out of it all is, if the director wants to work that way, you've got to be ready to work that way. There are some that want to work the other way and do a beautiful image-make film. That's fair enough, because that's a different kind of film, so therefore that's what you're asked to help make, so that's what you do. But then the next film, you might be asked, I want to move along real fast, print, take one. And you go, gulp, let's go. Because that's the film he wants to make, and you have to help him make it. So it's very important that pre-production is never wasted. I've been fired.
So we have, so what? So,
Thank you very much. I hope there's some sense in there.
So we have one last question from the lady in front, please.
John, I'm here.
I request the audience to please be seated.
Yeah.
One last question.
John, I have one question for you. So we are running one not-for-profit through which we have been arranging various filmmaking courses for persons with disabilities, and using their talent we are making short films and documentaries. So my question to you is, with your vast experience, have you seen any cinematographer sitting in a wheelchair? And because there are misconceptions, I feel, that a wheelchair user can't be a successful cinematographer. So with your experience and with the latest technologies and digital camera, drone, all these things, do you think that there are opportunities for wheelchair users to become successful cinematographers? What do you think?
Oh, there's always the opportunity, I feel, and more so because, the world is now creating. I mean, back when I started, there were no film schools, there were no festivals like this. Oh, there was one little festival in Sydney, but the world now has got festivals all around the world for film. And making film now with the new digital cameras, you can make them on an iPhone. I mean, the iPhone is powerful enough to put a 4K res picture up there off an iPhone, and you can edit and put soundtracks on with an iPhone. And look at this fantastic film that I've heard about that's come out of America now called The Brutalist, which is going up now. It's made by a 33-year-old young man, for $6 million and 33 days shooting. He used VistaVision cameras. It runs for 3.5 hours, and it looks like it's going to crash the Academy Awards. That's what I love about it, is that the new cameras, the new revolution of digital cameras, the smallness of them, you can buy them for less than $20,000, although the lenses cost you a lot more, but by just going and shooting the movie, as long as it's written, then just go shoot it with whatever you've got, is what I love about the digital revolution. Back when it was film, it was a lot of backloading of, film negative and processing and all. It was a process. Whereas now, it's amazing out of the digital world, what you can create and then go home on your own laptops and edit and lay soundtracks and make the movie. But I'll say again, I think over the years and 60 movies that I've helped to make, an untold TV series and whatnot over the years, it's the script. Every time. There is nothing else.
And on that note, can we please show our appreciation for this legend, Mr. John Seal, with a big round of applause.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you
We would
very
like
much.
to thank you, Mr. John Seal, for such an insightful session. With this, our session comes to an end. We would like to thank you, audience, for being with us. We hope you had a lot to gain from this masterclass. A quick note, we would like to inform you that a new and exciting session has been added today at 7:30 p.m. And the title of the session is Documentary the New Feature, wherein Mr. Shekhar Kapoor, Festival Director of 55th IFFI and acclaimed actress Ms. Manisha Koirala will be in conversation with the world's biggest documentary filmmaker in the world, Ms. Lucy Walker. We surely want to see you all there. Thank you and have a great evening.